Good evening and thank you for joining us on this Shoreline Sightseeing Architecture River Tour. My name is Richard and I will be your docent today. Now I'm about to ask everybody here how you're doing this evening, but before I do that, I'd like to let you know a little something about myself. One of my pet peeves is when I'm part of a group and somebody says, "How's everybody doing?" and we give our response and then they go, "Well, that's not good enough," or "I couldn't hear you." I am not going to do that to you, folks. I get the impulse to limp into it. Trust me, I do. What if, God forbid, I'm the only one that makes a noise? How mortifying would that be? So I'm going to encourage each and every one of you to make a noise. It could be whatever pitch, volume, or timbre you'd like it to be, so long as you feel it is reflective of your current mood. But let's keep it family-friendly, folks. All right, how's everybody doing this evening? Woo! Full marks, no notes. Thank you for joining me on that journey. Speaking of journeys, I hope that everyone here is ready to travel through time, because ready or not, that's what's happening. That's right, at the end of this tour, you will all find yourselves 1 1/4 hour in the future. That's right, it'll only take us 75 minutes to get there. But don't worry, folks, because I'm here to help you fill that time. For those of you that do not know, the word docent comes from the Latin docere, which means to teach. And so it's really just a fancy word for teacher. And as your teacher for the next 75 minutes, I'd like to set a goal. I would love it if each and every one of us learned 25 new facts about the city of Chicago and its architecture. Now look, I get that this is a big ask. All right, it's a lovely Saturday evening. We are doing the type of thing we do on vacation. But there are a couple of important points that I think we should consider. Number one, there's way more than 25 facts on this tour. All right, I'm going to be talking about buildings. I'm going to be talking about notable locations. There's also an ample amount of history spread throughout this tour as well. So there's plenty of facts to choose from. The second important point, and I cannot stress this one enough, folks, there is no exam at the end of this tour. That's right. So anything you learn is really on the honor system. Your primary responsibility is to enjoy yourselves. I, however, have a lot of facts to deliver and not a lot of time to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. The first building we're going to talk about is up here on the right. It's this white building with the clock tower at the top. That is the Wrigley Building. And if that name sounds familiar, that's because it's the same Wrigley as Wrigley Field and Wrigley Chewing Gum. The Wrigley Building was opened in 1924 and is designed in a style called Spanish Revival. Now we'll see a couple of revival styles of architecture over the course of the tour, and that's because there was a period of time in American history when we didn't really have an architectural voice of our own. So we often look to Europe and to the past for inspiration. In fact, the clock tower there of the Wrigley Building is modeled after the bell tower of the Seville Cathedral in Spain. The Wrigley Building is also clad in 250,000 glazed terracotta tiles. They are decorative. They have a slight gradient. They get lighter in color as they go up the building. This helps to draw the eye upward. They provide a degree of fireproofing to the building, and they are incredibly delicate. So the Wrigley Building has to be washed by hand, which happens annually. You'll also notice that pedestrian bridge up there in between the two sides of the Wrigley Building. That wasn't actually part of the original construction of the building. That was added after the fact, and the reason it was added was because for a long time in the city of Chicago there was something called branch banking laws. That's right, this tour is about to get exciting. These branch banking laws made it illegal for a bank to have more than one location, and there just so happened to be a bank that had offices in the Wrigley Building, but in both sides. So they added that pedestrian walkway in an effort to avoid violating those branch banking laws. And by the way, folks, that is not the only loophole we're going to learn about over the course of the tour. All right, this is, after all, a Chicago architecture tour. By the way, I do want to point out, folks, the captain asked us, so we want to keep our side conversations up here on the top deck to a minimum. You can see why, right? There's a lot of people out here on this river, and they're all having a great time. We can't control anything that happens outside these rails. All we can control is what's going on inside them. And hey, I want you to know, too, as much fun as they look like they're having, they're not learning nearly as much as we are. That's right. The next building we're going to talk about is very easy to identify because it is helpfully wearing a name tag. It's also on the right side of the river. It is, of course, the Trump International Hotel and Tower. This is the second tallest building in Chicago, and it's an excellent example of contextualism. Now, contextualist architecture is site-specific. It draws inspiration from its surroundings, both natural and constructed. In the case of Trump Tower, there are 3 setbacks going up going up the side of the building. A setback is when the building goes up, and then goes in, and then goes up again. Each of these setbacks contains a patio, but they also correspond with the heights of neighboring buildings. As we pass under DuSable Bridge here, I'll tell you all about those. That's the thing about cities, folks. You can't get away from the traffic no matter where you go. So the first setback up here on the lower right is the same height as the Wrigley building right next door. The second setback up there on the left is the same height as the Jewelers building over there on the left side of the river. Very square, very ornate dome at the top. That's the Jewelers building. Some of you might actually recognize that as Gotham City Courthouse from Batman Begins. By the way, folks, those were some guests from my last tour. They had a good time. I'm not saying the pressure's on, but... Coming up here, and then the third setback up there on the right is the same height as AMA Plaza, the black box building just around on the other side of Trump Tower. We will get a better view of that one as we come around the building. Now, Trump International Hotel and Tower was completed in 2009, and it was designed by a man named Adrian Smith. This is a man who knows a thing or two about tall buildings. He's the designer of the current world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. And if you're curious how Trump Tower stacks up against the Burj Khalifa, you would literally need to stack it. Two Trump Towers, stacked one on top of the other, would give you the approximate height of the Burj Khalifa. Now, coming into view just beyond Trump Tower here on the right is AMA Plaza. This is, again, the inspiration for that third setback. AMA Plaza was completed in 1972, and it was designed in a style where it was designed by a man named Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. Now, he popularized the phrase, less is more, and I think that philosophy is very well represented in the largest of his black box modernist buildings. Black box modernism is stark and dark, simple and efficient. We will discuss it later on in the tour, as well as modernism in general. Now, Mies van der Rohe would not see the completion of AMA Plaza, which took place a little over a decade after his passing. But he was also a teacher of architecture, and some of his students designed buildings that we're going to see here along the river as well. One of those buildings is right next door. These corn-cob-shaped towers up here on the right, these are part of a complex called Marina City, designed by a man named Bertrand Goldberg. Bertrand Goldberg believed that buildings should reflect nature, and in his words, there are no right angles in nature. And so we end up with these curvilinear modernist towers. When Marina City was completed in 1968, the downtown area was still largely industrial and quite smelly, so there wasn't a whole lot of demand for residences in the area. Bertrand Goldberg's solution to this was a city within a city. This apartment complex had shops and restaurants, a bowling alley, an ice skating rink, and a cinema, which has since become the Chicago House of Blues. There's also, of course, a marina to park your boat, and a garage to park your car, valet only for obvious reasons. Right? There aren't enough suspended tennis balls in the world to give me the confidence to park in that garage. No, thank you. If we shift our attention over to the left side of the river, we're going to highlight a few buildings that I think incorporate time as an interesting architectural quirk, beginning with 77 West Wacker, that mirrored building with the pin lights going up the side there. This is designed in a style called neo-classical. And breaking that down, you've got neo, which means new, and classical, which references the architecture of the ancient world. In this case, we are talking about the ancient Greeks. If you look up there at the top of the building there, it looks a lot like the Greek Parthenon up top. So the inspiration for this building comes to us from the distant past, but the materials and techniques used were much more common in 1992 when the building was completed. Also, a bonus fact about 77 West Wacker, it was designed by a man named Ricardo Bofia. Now, he was from a family of architects, and he actually designed his first building when he was just 17 years old. Isn't that incredible? My greatest achievement at 17 years old was becoming a crew trainer at Taco Bell. But I think it served me well. Look where I am today, living moss. Thank you. Right next door to that, we've got this glass building. It's got cutouts going down the side here. Now everything below that first patio there was originally part of a different building. Today this is 111 West Wacker. Back in the day, this was the Waterview Tower. Now construction was halted on that one following the 2008 financial crisis. So the building was actually abandoned for quite a while. It was salvaged though. The stone exterior was replaced with reflective glass and 34 more floors were added to be completed in 2014. So this building gets its foundation, and you might say some of its bones, also from the past, from the previous building. And then if we move 2 doors down here, we've got that blocky building with the columns along the top there. That is the Builders Building. The side closest to us here was completed in 1927, but the extension out there on the right was completed in the 1980s, 60 years later. You can see though how the designers of that extension honored the original intentions of the building, almost like a call and response through time. And so if you've been following along, we've got a spark, we've got a start, and we've got a complete piece of art, all plucked from the past and used by designers to inform their present in what I like to call a quantum collaboration. Up ahead of us here is one of our many fixed trunnion bascule or Chicago-style bridges on the Wells Street Bridge. Chicago is home to the most movable bridges in North America, at 37 in total. We are number 2 worldwide behind Amsterdam. Both the Wells Street Bridge here and the Lake Street Bridge over on the South Branch are double-deck bridges, with that top deck serving our L trains, so called because those platforms are elevated. So if you're visiting from out of town, keep your cameras at the ready. There is no more Chicago a photo than catching a train crossing the river. Between the 2 bridges, you should have plenty of opportunities to snap that photograph. Passing out from under the Wall Street Bridge, we're going to take a look at here to our right. We're going to talk about this 2.5-acre facade and the building it belongs to, Merchandise Mart. Completed in 1930, this was the largest building in the world until the completion of the Pentagon in 1943. It's an excellent example of Art Deco architecture. It's got long vertical lines. The building's practically wearing pinstripes. It's got deep inset windows to enhance that verticality, and it's got geometric or machined ornamentation. You can just make out the diamond and chevron patterns here along the bottom and along the top of the building. Art Deco has come to represent the opulence and the optimism of the 1920s. Merchandise Mart takes up over 2 city blocks. It has 7.5 miles of hallways, 3.7 million square feet of office space. It has its own L stop, and up until 2008, it actually had its own zip code. These days, though, don't worry, it just share with its neighbors. At this point on the tour, we are making our first approach to Wolf Point. This is the location of This is the location on the Chicago River where the north, south, and main branches of the river meet, and it is the historic center of the city of Chicago. Chicago was incorporated in 1833 as a wilderness outpost with a population of about 350 people. Over the course of the next 70 years, that population would expand to 1.7 million at the turn of the century, making Chicago one of the fastest growing cities in history. Now, there's a lot of really incredible buildings built around here at Wolf Point, but the one we're going to focus on is up ahead here on our left. This building that looks kind of like an arrow pointing into the ground here, this is 150 North Riverside, and the reason it's got that sort of V shape or Y shape down there at the bottom is actually because of the limitations of the land that it sits on. The back 2/3 of that lot have active underground Metra and Amtrak trains that run through there, and the front side is subject to a zoning law that requires a 30-foot setback for any buildings built along the Chicago River. This is to ensure that the riverfront remains open and accessible to the public. So this building's designers, a firm called Getch Partners, worked with a structural engineering firm out of Seattle, Washington, to design a building which redirects the weight or load of the building in onto a strong central core. Now, whenever you're building tall buildings, one thing that needs to be accounted for is something called drift. This is the tendency for buildings to sway in high-speed winds at elevation, which, by the way, we should consider that a feature rather than a bug, because things that do not bend tend to break. But we don't want that happening with our high-rises. It is, though, something that can be minimized or mitigated, and the way that 150 North Riverside accomplishes this is with something called inertial slosh dampers. That's fun to say, so I'm going to say it again. Inertial slosh dampers. There are 12 concrete tanks at the top of that building containing 160,000 gallons of water. When the wind pushes the building one way, the water sloshes back the other way, which helps to dampen that inertial force and keeps the building from moving too much in the wind. We'll discuss a couple of methods over the course of the tour of how builders manage drift. Now up ahead of us, beyond Washington Boulevard, is an area of the river that the other docents and I like to call Art Deco Canyon, because of the massive Art Deco buildings on either side of the river. Now we're going to discuss the Civic Opera building up there on the left on a return trip. But first, I want to direct your attention to 2 North Riverside Plaza, coming into view just beyond the bridge there on the right. This was originally the Chicago Daily News building, and it's one of the first skyscrapers in the world to include an open-air public plaza as part of its design. This also makes it the first building in Chicago to intentionally develop toward the river. It's another great example of Art Deco architecture. It's got those long vertical lines, it's got those deep inset windows, and it's got that geometric ornamentation. But the side of the building facing us here on the river also features bas-reliefs, or ornamental carvings, which highlight the history of journalism and provide a timeline of the written word. Now for our purposes here on the tour, this building also starts another timeline. And that's because this next section of the river up ahead on the right is actually a pretty clear illustration of shifting architectural trends in the States. 2 North Riverside Plaza was completed in 1929. That's the same year that the stock market crashed, sending us into the Great Depression. Follow that up with World War II, and it would be about 25 years before new buildings started going up again. And by the time they did, tastes had changed. Because when you compare the opulence of the 1920s to the austerity of the Depression and wartime, it's easy to see how a new generation of designers might want to move away from excess ornamentation. And so we enter the modernist era of architecture in the States. Gateway Centers 1 and 2, these black box buildings here on the right, completed in 1965 and 1967 respectively, are excellent examples of that black box modernist style. They are stark and dark, simple and efficient, and like many modernist styles of architecture, they emphasize function over form. These are not meant to be beautiful, these are meant to be functional. Now, this is a style that was popularized by, as I mentioned before, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, but these two were actually designed by the firms Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. Their perceived habit at the time of imitating Mies's work here and other places in the city saw Frank Lloyd Wright refer to the firm as the Three Blind Mies, which is a little heady, but it's a pretty solid burn. Frank Lloyd Wright, by the way, was a contemporary, a peer of Mies van der Rohe. We won't see any of his work here on the river, but if you are dead set on seeing his work in person, you could take the Green Line out to Oak Park to do so. Now, as we move past the black boxes of Gateway Centers 1 and 2, we approach the white box that is Gateway Center 3, also on the right. Completed in 1971, Gateway 3 is designed in a style called International Style. Since built